The sun was sinking low over Willow Ridge, painting the sidewalks in tired streaks of gold, when Officer Noah Carter strolled past the shuttered pet clinic with his old partner Bruno. The German Shepherd,
What is it, boy?
gray now around the muzzle,
You sense something?
stopped suddenly. His body went rigid, not in warning of danger, but in recognition of something abandoned. In the shadows, shoved against the wall, sat a rusted wire cage. Inside, 3 fragile puppies lay huddled together. A cardboard sign dangled from the latch. 3 for $1. Must go today. Noah felt his stomach turn. Bruno crept forward, sniffing the air with quiet urgency. One pup's side was smeared with dried blood. Another could barely hold itself upright. And the third, though trembling, fixed its gaze on Bruno with a look that felt too knowing, too familiar. What kind of heartless hand trades life for $1? What kind of story lay buried in their pain? Miles away, Maple Ridge carried its own kind of silence. The town breathed under a sky stretched thin with heat, wind weaving through paper wrappers along cracked sidewalks. The day's last light flickered against the faded sign of Pine and Paw's Supply, its rusty chain groaning with every gust. Officer Nate Walker eased his cruiser down Main Street, finishing the end of his route. Broad-shouldered, uniform pressed though worn at the edges, he carried the kind of stillness only men who'd shouldered too much could wear. Behind him, stretched across a fleece blanket in the back seat, lay Rex. 10 years old, battle-scarred. His bent ear and hind leg scar spoke of the ambush that ended his working days. But Nate never left him behind. Some partners earn a place that no badge can measure. As they rolled past the supply shop, Rex lifted his head. His ears pricked. His body stiffened. A sharp bark cracked the quiet, urgent and unyielding. Nate slowed, eyes catching on the window's dusty glass. What he saw made his jaw lock tight. Inside, under a humming fluorescent bulb, 3 German Shepherd pups hung limply from butcher-style hooks, suspended in harnesses meant for collars and leashes. Above them, a crude sign, $1 for all. Nate's boots struck hard against the floor as he entered. The smell hit first, chemical lemon, barely masking rot. Rex padded close, his growl low and steady. Behind the counter lounged Mr. Lell, a wiry man with yellowed fingers and eyes that measured profit where no soul should. He chewed on a toothpick, careless. "Afternoon, officer. Looking for something?" Nate didn't answer. He was already kneeling at the rack, lifting each fragile body down, his arms careful, steady. Rex pressed close, nosing each pup gently, as if willing them to keep breathing. Only the smallest stirred, paw twitching weakly. "What is this?" Nate's voice was flat, heavy with quiet fury. "Some guy dropped 'em off," Lel muttered with a shrug. "Said they're worthless. Been feeding them, space is tight. Tried to sell 'em cheap."
No takers.
Nate stared at him, eyes unreadable. Then he pulled a crumpled $1 from his wallet and slammed it onto the counter. "Unhook the sign. They're mine now." The pups pressed against Nate's chest as he left, fragile sparks of life bundled into his jacket. One nipped his thumb with defiance, that one would be Ember. The round-bellied boy, calm but unblinking, would come to be Bruno. And the smallest, trembling like a dry leaf, buried her nose in his collar, Piper. Back in the cruiser, Rex curled protectively around them, his scarred body forming a wall of warmth. The pups nestled close, finding a heartbeat to steady their own. Nate slid behind the wheel, breath tight in his chest. $1 had bought them a chance, but something darker lingered behind that shop door. By morning, the heat had broken. Dew clung to the grass as the cruiser rolled to a stop outside Jensen Veterinary and Rescue, a modest brick building tucked behind the hardware store. A wooden chime rattled softly above the door. Nate stepped out, cradling the bundle. Rex followed close, moving slower now, but sharp-eyed as ever. Inside, the scent of antiseptic mingled with coffee. Behind the counter, Dr. Mara Jensen lifted her head. Mid-40s, braid over her shoulder, hands steady from years of rescuing the broken and unwanted. Her gaze landed on the bundle, and her expression shifted instantly. "What did you bring me this time, Walker?" 3 shepherd pups, he said. Found them hanging in pine and paws. Sign said $1 for all. I need you to check them. Mara pushed through the gate, her voice dropping. God! She pulled gloves over her hands. Get them on the table. One by one, Nate laid them down. Ember bristled with a weak growl. Piper shrank from the cold steel, and Bruno lay flat, breaths shallow. Mara worked quickly, her sharp eyes catching what Nate had missed. She pressed Bruno's side, then flicked on a UV light. A faint glow shone along his spine. Injection site, she murmured. Hormones, maybe steroids. Illegal stuff breeders use to bulk them up fast. Nate's jaw tightened. Mara checked Ember, another glow. Then Piper, who panicked, scrabbling to escape. Nate steadied her, murmuring quietly. But it was Rex who stepped close, licking her ear, grounding her. Slowly, her trembling eased, though her wide eyes stayed fixed on the door. Mara's voice softened. That's not just fear. That's what cruelty teaches. Nate looked down at Piper, his hand resting gently against her side. He didn't answer. Mara bent over Piper with steady hands, cleaning the small wound on her shoulder. Her eyes narrowed as she examined the skin more closely. Every one of them has injection sites. More than one. This isn't treatment, this is alteration. Nate's jaw tightened. For resale. She nodded grimly. Thicker coats, faster growth, more muscle. Black market breeders use cocktail injections to make pups look like premium stock. But shepherds, their systems can't take it. Livers shut down. Most don't survive. Piper whimpered when the scalpel tray clinked against the counter. Mara glanced up. That reaction? That's conditioning. Someone's been punishing them with noise. She flinches because she expects pain. Before Nate could respond, Rex shifted sharply. His nose pressed low to the baseboard heater beneath the counter, a stiff growl rising in his chest. Nate crouched beside him. You've got something, boy? Rex pawed once at the paneling, then barked, sharp and deliberate. Nate reached under, fingers brushing something wedged tight. He pulled free a dust-caked plastic bag. Inside were 2 capped syringes and a scrap of paper smeared with numbers. AXT 448K9. Mara leaned closer. Her face darkened. That's no prescription. XT. God, we stopped carrying that 5 years ago. The compound was pulled. Dangerous side effects. Whoever left this. Someone's using my clinic as a drop site. Nate sealed the evidence, his voice low. Not anymore. Meanwhile, Piper, small and trembling, crawled to Rex and buried her nose into his fur. The old shepherd didn't move, just let her cling. Mara shook her head, her voice softer now. These aren't strays. They're discards. Leftovers from someone cutting corners for profit. I've seen it before. Different breeds, same ending. They rarely last this long. Nate's expression hardened. Then we make sure this isn't buried. Not this time. He gave Rex a quiet pat. Good work, partner. The old dog wagged once, slow but proud. When Nate slid the pups back into the cruiser, a small spark of life had returned. Ember sat taller now, eyes bright with defiance. Bruno had rolled onto his back, snoring despite it all. Piper was tucked against Rex, her breathing steady for the first time. Mara leaned into the window before he pulled away. Keep them warm. Feed small. I'll call when blood work's in. Nate nodded, but he didn't point the car toward home. His gut told him this wasn't about 3 sick pups. It was about something bigger, and he had to follow it. By afternoon, shadows stretched long across Maple Ridge, lamp posts cutting black shapes against the pale sidewalks. Inside the precinct's small tech room, Nate leaned over a monitor. A grainy video feed flickered. A security camera outside Pine and Paws, 3 nights old. On screen, a man in a long black duster moved with casual arrogance. A fedora dipped low, hiding half his face. In one hand, a heavy metal case swung at his side. Industrial, the kind meant for tools or vials, not pet supplies. He pushed through the clinic's side door, vanished inside, then returned empty-handed. Moments later, a cardboard box was set down. Inside, 3 tiny dark shapes shifted weakly. Ember, Bruno, Piper. The man didn't linger. He strode back to a silver pickup, tossed his coat across the seat, and drove away. "Freeze it," Nate muttered, tapping the screen as the truck's plate came into view. Dust smeared the numbers, but enhancement pulled them clear. A name flashed back from the database. Lyle Darnell, 58. Last known address, Millersfield, New Mexico. Nate exhaled sharply. Darnell. A ghost from 4 years ago. The feds had chased him out of El Paso for running a black market kennel. Dogs drugged, conditioned, trained for aggression. Sold across borders to the highest bidder. Security firms. Criminal outfits. Anyone with cash. The raid came too late. By the time they stormed his compound, the dogs were gone. The files vanished. And Darnell slipped into the wind. Now his trail had surfaced again. From the corner, Rex growled low, steady. His eyes locked on the screen, on the frozen image of that metal case. He sniffed once, then sat back, tail flicking. "You know him," Nate whispered. "It's the same scent, the same chemical." Rex barked once, sharp and certain. That was all Nate needed. The pieces had started to fit, and this time Darnell had left more than shadows behind. That evening, under the last wash of daylight, Nate brought the pups into his backyard. The fence was worn, the grass patchy, but it was Rex's kingdom, a place of sunlit mornings and quiet nights. And now, for 3 broken souls, it was the beginning of something more. The pups were finding their paws now, wobbling across the yard like tiny explorers. Bruno gnawed happily on an old boot, Ember pounced on a drifting leaf with fierce determination, and Piper stayed glued to the porch steps, shrinking back when a truck backfired down the road. Nate had been testing them gently, whistling short patterns, giving small cues to see what they remembered. One evening, while Ember was busy worrying a rope toy, he gave a sharp whistle. To his surprise, she stopped cold and sat, ears perked, gaze locked on him like she'd been drilled to obey. "Rex, you see that?" Nate murmured. From his spot in the grass, the old shepherd cracked one eye open. Nate tried again, a different whistle, this time paired with a flash of his pocket light. Piper froze instantly. Her ears drooped, body folding in on itself. She wasn't afraid of the light. She was bracing for what usually came after it. "They weren't just handled," Nate said quietly. "They were trained." Bruno, meanwhile, rolled onto his back and pawed lazily at the sky, oblivious to the tension. Nate chuckled once, though it didn't last. Training, injections, a man who vanished when things got hot. It was too neat, too deliberate. He picked up his phone and dialed Sarah Kendrick in Denver. She answered on the second ring, her voice sharp as ever. She had a reputation for connecting dots others missed, and Nate trusted her instincts. He laid out the pieces, video footage, syringes, the pup's strange responses, Rex's scent confirmation. "You think Darnell's back?" she asked. "I think he never stopped. I'll dig into permit databases. If he's moving animals, he'll need paperwork, even if it's doctored. Give me a day. You're a lifesaver. No, you owe me lunch. Don't forget it." By dusk, the pups had collapsed into a tangled heap in the grass. Ember fought sleep until the last second, her eyes fixed on the open field beyond the fence like she was waiting for a signal. "You were made to follow," Nate whispered. "But now you get to lead." Rex huffed beside him, nudging Ember until she gave in and curled up. The smell of chili drifted from the house, but Nate's appetite was gone. He knew Darnell's face now, his habits, what he left behind. And this time he wouldn't disappear so easily. Later that week, Nate's cruiser rattled along a narrow gravel track outside town. Branches scraped against the roof like fingers dragging a warning. The sign ahead was warped and nearly swallowed by weeds. Bluff Creek Kennels, closed until further notice. From the passenger seat, Rex gave a low growl. Nate cut the engine and stepped out, flashlight low, eyes scanning the abandoned ranch-style building. The tin roof sagged, windows shattered, but the fencing around it was too intact, too well kept. They circled silently. No food scents, no waste, no fresh decay. Just earth too clean. At the side, an old shed leaned crooked in the dark. The door creaked ajar. Rex froze, then gave 2 short barks, his signal for danger. Inside, the dust was thick except for a wide, scraped path. At the far end sat a hatch set into the floor, padlock dangling but unlatched. Nate crouched, heart thudding, and eased it open. Cold, metallic air rushed out. A stairwell descended into black. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The steps groaned under his boots. The corridor at the bottom was concrete, narrow, walls damp with condensation. At the end, a holding room opened. Rows of kennels lined the walls, all empty. Silent. Too silent. But the evidence clung to the floor. Clumps of straw stained dark, scratches etched into concrete, claw marks along bars. A water bowl overturned, long dry. In one cage, black fur clung to wire, and smears of blood streaked the drain. Rex's hackles rose. He pulled toward a pile of straw in the corner, nose driving hard. Nate swept his light. Beneath the straw, Rex unearthed a tarp. Under that, a burlap sack. Stiff. Heavy. Nate pulled it open, while burning his throat. Bones spilled inside. Dozens. Small skulls, jaws with teeth intact, femurs, dog bones, too many sizes to count. And near the bottom, a tiny plastic capsule. A microchip. Nate snapped photos, bagged what he could, his hands moving on instinct while his mind reeled. Rex stood guard at the entrance, body taut, gaze locked on the stairs as though expecting someone to return. "This wasn't abandoned," Nate whispered. "It was cleared out in a hurry." That night, the pups stayed in his office, a makeshift playpen set up against the back wall. Ember shredded the corner of her pad, restless. Piper refused to stay in the light, skittering behind the desk whenever shadows passed. Bruno sprawled belly up, snoring without a care. Nate called Mara Jensen. By 10, she was there, hair pulled back, sweatshirt thrown on. She scanned the microchip capsule and typed in the code. Her face paled. This belonged to a registered K9 Jax. Colorado State Patrol. 3 years ago. Nate froze. That was the raid. The same one that forced Rex into retirement. Mara's eyes flicked to the pups. Which means one of these 3 is his bloodline. Nate looked over. Ember sat closest to the bars, her gaze too steady, too aware for a pup her age. "They weren't breeding pets," he said quietly. "They were breeding K9s. Selling them." Mara nodded. "And if they had Jax, they had others." Nate sank onto the desk edge, the weight of it settling hard. Rex padded over and laid one paw across his boot, steady as a promise. It all came together then. Stolen dogs, forced breeding, chemical shortcuts, training turned cruel. "This wasn't just a kennel," Nate whispered. "It was a farm. A ghost kennel. And the silence wasn't peace. It was a warning." The night pressed down heavy, rain glistening against cracked asphalt, as Nate tightened his jacket collar and leaned over Reeves' shoulder to study the glowing red. It pulsed steady on the screen, fixed to a warehouse at the edge of Harper's Bluff. A district known more for boarded-up factories than living souls. Rex shifted at Nate's side, the muscles in his shoulders rigid, every nerve pulled taut like a wire ready to snap. He hadn't relaxed since Ember vanished. The air carried her scent faintly, enough to remind Rex but not enough to calm him. The cruiser engine ticked softly as it cooled, the only sound besides the distant hum of rain against steel. Nate ran his thumb over the scar on his palm. An old reminder of mistakes made too long ago. Ember had slipped through cracks he should have sealed, and now she was out there, somewhere between prey and weapon. He could picture her, bright eyes glowing under dim light, waiting for someone's command, waiting to be twisted into something she was never meant to be. Reeves glanced up. Signal hasn't budged. Either they're laying low, or... His voice trailed off. He didn't need to finish. Nate already knew the possibilities. The thought clawed at his gut. He looked at Rex, who sat motionless, eyes locked on the horizon like he could already see through walls and shadows. Nate tightened the leash in his hand but kept his voice low. "We'll get her back, boy, no matter what's waiting in there." Rex's ears twitched, his gaze never breaking from the distance. It wasn't just a promise Nate made aloud. It was a vow Rex seemed to understand. The storm pressed harder, lightning flashing against the hulking silhouette of the warehouse ahead. Inside, secrets waited. And somewhere in that silence, so did Ember. Chloe stepped into the room, damp hair pulled back, a weary smile flickering across her face. She carried a manila folder under one arm and the weight of everything they'd uncovered in her eyes. Nate handed her a mug without asking, and she accepted it, warming her hands before taking a seat across from him. For a moment, neither spoke. Words felt too small compared to what they'd seen, what they'd stopped, what they'd barely managed to pull from the fire. Rex lifted his head, gave her a slow blink, then rested it back on his paws. Chloe reached down and brushed her fingers across his fur. "You still carrying the whole world on your back, old man?" she murmured. Rex's ear twitched, and Bruno bounded over as if answering for him, dropping Nate's slipper into her lap. Chloe laughed, the sound brief but real. Ember stayed near the back door, sharp gaze locked on the street beyond, as though she knew their fight wasn't over. Piper stirred from her blanket, stretching long, fragile legs before nestling closer to Rex, who gave a small sigh but didn't move her away. The pack was whole for now, stitched together by survival and the fragile promise of peace. Chloe slid the folder onto the table. Inside were screenshots from the drive Emily Crane had leaked, the auction, the officials, the buyers. Names that mattered. Names that would shake the county when they came out. Nate stared at them, jaw tightening. This doesn't stop with Colt Raider. Darnell's still out there. Chloe nodded, her expression grim. And now he knows you're coming. The room fell quiet again, save for the steady sound of dogs breathing, paws twitching, the occasional thump of a tail against the floor. Outside, sunlight touched the precinct yard, pale gold spilling across the fence line. Nate looked out at it, then at Rex, then at the pups. For all the scars and shadows left behind, there was something else too. Something that couldn't be bought, broken, or trained out. Hope. The glow of the candles flickered against faces lined with both grief and gratitude. Children held their parents' hands, neighbors pressed close together, and in the center, Nate stood with Rex at his side. The pups huddled nearby, their coats catching the soft light like halos. The square was silent at first, broken only by the gentle hum of wind through the trees. Then, slowly voices began to rise. Not in anger, not in fear, but in remembrance and hope. Stories poured out. A farmer recalling how Rex had tracked his missing daughter through a snowstorm. A young woman describing the night her abusive partner had been brought down after Rex cornered him in an alley. And Jimmy, the boy with the unevenly carved collar, speaking just loud enough for those closest to hear. "He saved me." Rex didn't understand the words, but he felt them. Every pair of eyes, every hand reaching out, every candle lifted high. It was for him, for what he represented. Not just survival, but something greater. Resilience, loyalty, a bond that no cruelty could sever. Nate's throat tightened as he watched the flames ripple like a tide across the crowd. Chloe stepped forward, her voice steady, carrying over the gathering. "This town has faced shadows darker than most people ever will. But we didn't just endure. We fought back. We reclaimed what was stolen. And tonight we honor not only those who stood in the line of fire, but those who never had a choice, the voiceless who trusted us to fight for them." She looked down at Rex, who stared back with calm, steady eyes. The candles reflected in his gaze, twin embers burning bright even in his old age. Nate rested a hand on his partner's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of breath. As the night deepened and the candles burned low, one truth settled across Maple Ridge like the final note of a hymn. Some guardians don't wear uniforms or carry badges. Some simply walk beside us on four legs, carrying burdens too heavy for words, reminding us of the kind of strength that doesn't fade with time. And for the first time in years, as the last flame flickered out and the crowd dispersed, Rex allowed himself to rest. Not as a soldier, not as a survivor, but as a guardian finally at peace. Walls only love. And may we never forget that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with force, but with patience, kindness, and the courage to stay when it would be easier to walk away. Under the stars of Maple Ridge, with the pups asleep and Rex keeping his eternal watch, it was clear that this wasn't just a story about survival. It was a story about redemption. About how scars, whether on skin or soul, don't mark the end of the road, but the beginning of a new one. The porch creaked as Nate leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting from the worn sign on the gate to the steady rise and fall of Rex's chest. Guardian. The word gleamed faintly, not just a title, but a truth carved into every heart that had been touched by his presence. And somewhere in that quiet, in the rhythm of dogs breathing and the hush of night air, there was peace. Not the fleeting kind, but the kind that takes root. The kind that heals. The kind that lasts.